Well, hello, everyone. This is Wilson Cole. I'm president of ELOC Global, which is a parent company that owns Adams, Evans, and Ross Recruiting and Staffing Solutions and Backdoor Hire. And I am joined online with somebody that truly does not need an introduction, but it is Danny Cahill. Let me give you, if there's anybody out there living under a rock for the last 20 years, Danny went into recruiting right out of college, was general manager at 26. At 27, he bought Hobson and grew it into one of the largest recruiting firms in his space. And he's been the past chair for the Pinnacle Society. He was elected into the Knapp's Hall of Fame. He is a true Renaissance man. He's an author. He is a playwright, and he has a recent book. I don't know, it's been a few years out there, but Aging Disgracefully. Danny, how are you doing? And welcome to the podcast.
I'm great, Wilson. Thanks for having me.
Well, certainly. Well, Danny, let me ask you this. I mean, we know how, the age that you went into right out of college and things along those lines, but the bigger question is, how did you get into the recruiting? Was it something that you always wanted to be a recruiter, or was it something that you just kind of stumbled into?
Oh, God, is there anybody who grew up wanting to be a recruiter? Who is that person? I would love to meet that person and their therapist. No, I think it really came down to, like any 22-year-old who was an English major who had sort of dreams about writing, but that's not how you make a living. You used the right phrase. I stumbled into the way the industry worked back then. Was they were called employment agencies, not staffing firms, and they ran ads. And the ads were extremely deceptive. The ads were like management trainee. And I had no idea what that meant. And I walked in, and the owner was charismatic and energetic and had a very nice suit, and his name was on the door. And I saw a big Saab 9000 outside that I knew was his. And I was like, this guy seems to do pretty well. And I got talked into taking the job. I had literally no idea what the job was. I went home and told my father I had gotten a job, and he was excited. And he said, "What are you going to be doing?" I said, "No idea." And he said, "What are they going to pay you?" And I said, "Apparently it's straight commission for a while." And so my father was thrilled that I had gone 4 years of college to get a job that didn't pay anything, doing something that I didn't know what I was going to be doing. But, I mean, that's youth, right? That's the fantastic thing about youth. You dive in, you make it work. I train rookies, all day long in my office, and I know they're scared, and I just tell them, you know what, be bold, man. Just make a lot of noise, reach out and harass people. Good things will happen. And that's what I spend my day doing, trying to get people to keep the faith.
Well, that's a neat segue into this other question, because you're obviously one of the greatest recruiters of all times, and I mean that seriously from the aspect, I've traveled the trade show circuit. I can tell you, whenever I see that you're on the speaking list, I always know that the turnout is going to be huge, and in our numbers, actually, you bring our numbers up because you're speaking at a conference that we happen to be attending, selling our goods. So I certainly appreciate the contribution there. But how did you get into training? So you're rocking along as a recruiter, and then one day you said, "I want to be a trainer." How was that transition? No.
There's, believe me, I wrote, as you said, I wrote a book 2 years ago called Aging Disgracefully, which is a personal memoir about the role shame has played in my life, and I think plays a role in anybody who was raised poor, because then you're trying to prove yourself for the rest of your life. So I certainly know a lot about shame, but the answer to your question is one of the real sources of pride in my life, because I had no intention of being a trainer. I didn't even know what trainers were. I remember going to a couple of the early trainer sessions, and I won't mention their names, but I thought they were, kind of hucksters. I mean, lots of obvious sales gimmickry, and I was just kind of turned off by it. But the truth was that we were running, the previous owner who I bought the company from, we were running a boiler room. We were hiring 5 bright-eyed, bushy-tailed people a month and firing 4 of them. And he was dragging me in because I was doing well. And he would say, Danny's 24 years old. He made $250,000 last year. You could be just like him. And I was okay with that the first year, but by the second year, I was like, I will not be used this way. Nobody makes it here. We have 100% turnover. And at 24 years old, I volunteered. I said to the owner, let me just take over the training. You hire these people, but let me train them. And he said, well, what do you know about training? I said, I don't know anything about training, but how much worse can I be than you? You have 100% turnover. So he was like, good point. And, my earliest training, as some people on this call will remember, I had no pretense that I was a speaker. I had this sort of aversion to being considered a speaker. So, and maybe you were at them, Wilson, but I used to just have the hotels bring live phones on stage, and this is pre-internet, and I would say, who's got a company that they can't get inside? And somebody would raise their hand, and I would call information, ask for the number of that company. I'd call that company live in front of a bunch of people and make a cold business development call or a cold recruiting call. And that was my early training.
Wow.
Watch what I do. And I had no idea that I thought people would say, what kind of a speaker is this? He doesn't even have any material. Instead, people were like, wow, this kid's got guts. So yeah, then after that, it becomes extremely, superficial, vain. I got a rush from being up in front of an audience. I thought it was fun. I was newly single at that time, so I thought it was a great way to go around the country and meet people. And that's when I realized, at some point I probably should turn this into a business and actually write down the things that I say on the phone. So the training, I think it's fair to say, came really from a place of idealism. I just couldn't stand, and I can't to this day, stand to hear recruiters suck. It really just comes down to that, Wilson. I've certainly made a lot more money as a recruiter than I've ever made as a speaker, and I've made more money as a speaker than anyone. But the real motivation was not monetary. It was just, this business is great if you're good at it. It's miserable if you're bad at it. So let me help you be good at it, is really what it was coming from.
Well, that's, I often find that the best ideas are when they're born out of genuine necessity and also from
yeah.
So I
no doubt.
I certainly hear what you're saying. Okay, well, speaking of that, what advice would you give to somebody that's just coming into recruiting, Danny? Let's say this is their first day on the job. What would be your elevator speech of, okay, here's what you need to do in the next 30, 60, 90 days? Because I would assume that with a recruiter, like with any industry, that first 90 days is absolutely critical in a new venture.
Yeah, it is. And it's what's fascinating about this, though, Wilson, is, and I know you know this, but for your audience, is the reason why people like me don't burn out is because if you're paying attention at all, the business has evolved. So in other words, 15 years ago, if you were on the phone and you asked me that question, it's easy. It's, you know what, ignore everybody, put your head down, come in the morning, and make your calls, dude. Just keep your head down. The more calls you make, the better things will be. And the senior people in your office have gotten soft and lazy, and they're afraid to call certain people. They think certain companies don't pay fees, but they haven't called them in 3 years. You call everybody. Cast a wide net. Go get them, Tiger. But if you do that now, you will absolutely fail. So it's evolved. So I do think, and I had this fight with owners who've been in the business for as long as I have. They always say, "Oh, the business is so easy now. You got the internet. We used to just have, the yellow pages, and I used to walk 20 miles to school in snow because I really wanted to learn. And these kids these days." Well, no, I think it's much harder to get established. So the reality is, what I tell people, and I just started rookies 2 weeks ago, so your question is trenchant. I tell everybody, look, it used to take 4 to 6 weeks to ramp up. Now it takes 4 to 6 months. Here's what you have to learn. You have to learn, A, how to sell, basic selling principles. I think the reason why internal recruiters, while a threat to our company and our industry, will not replace us is because they don't have sales skills. They have the same technology. They have actually better technology because some of these big corporations have more money, but they don't have the sales skills. So you need to learn how to influence people, read people, persuade people. Then I've got to teach you in the next 4 to 6 months how to apply those sales skills to the placement process. And now we've got to realize that unlike when I started, where there was one channel of communication, a phone, and you had to master it, now you must still master that phone in some ways, but you must also master how to send a good text. You must know how to use certain internet tools. This business has become as much systems engineering as it is social engineering, Wilson. You know, I mean, in the old days, I would say the business is a cross between art and science, but it's a whole lot more art than science. And now I would say it's about 50-50.
Well, because that's one thing that, you and I are the dinosaurs of the industry, because we remember the business before the internet. And the thing about the internet, and I agree with you, people, I was brought up a collection guy, and so the phone was
right.
critical, but collections and recruiting have a lot of similarities. But one thing that is definitely true, if you were dependent solely on the phone trying to find clients, you were going to have very skinny kids, because the phone does not work as well as it does, or it used to. Now it's still effective, but I agree with you. And if you don't evolve, then you are an extinct dinosaur, because I actually used to think that the pre-internet generation had a disadvantage. The older I get, with the ones that evolve and learn the technology, I actually think we have a huge advantage over our younger counterparts, because we remember what it was like prior to it, and so we probably appreciate some of the really neat opportunities, but there's also some pitfalls there as well. So that's going to segue into my next question: is what advice would you give a seasoned recruiter that has done this for 30 years, that the phone, banging that phone 100 calls a day is going to get you 3 leads, one's going to turn into a client, the old matrix, or at least over on our side of the industry? What advice would you give that seasoned recruiter to kind of change their line of thinking?
Well, so there's a spectrum, Wilson, right? So this is the weird thing about recruiters is they just want to live in this world of absolutes. They just want black or white. I mean, we argue about this at Pinnacle all the time. We just had our Pinnacle meeting last month, and there's a group of Pinnacle, and they're like, I still get all my job orders from making phone calls, and the rest of you losers who are on LinkedIn, reading your LinkedIn Pulse articles and writing your blogs, you're all, babies. And at the end of the day, if you've got enough of a personality and good energy, and I get my jobs from phone calls. And by the way, they're not wrong. When I look at our fiscal year ends September 30th, so I just ran the year's data a couple of months ago, and sure, to this day, 2019, the majority of our job orders we got from marketing calls, pretty classic marketing calls. However, we have a tremendously senior staff, so they're very niched, they're well-known, they're branded, they get callbacks. So there's a spectrum. You certainly should still make cold marketing calls. If you're a company that has abandoned the phone for, say, marketing automation tools, where all you do is send out emails to the proper landing pages, then I think you are going to be in big trouble. There's a spectrum. So the truth is in the middle. You have to combine those channels of communication. The same thing is true on the candidate side. If all you're doing is sending in-mail messages to candidates and doing nothing different than an internal recruiter does, however, you want $30,000 for it, guess what? You are going to struggle for business, even in a wonderful economy like this. So the reality is, and this is why I do think it's more of a challenge, I think you have got to have multiple channels of communication going on at the same time. You know, the old school that you and I grew up in the morning you make business development calls while your energy is high, and in the afternoon you make recruiting calls as your energy starts to fade. Well, that's just flat crazy now. The best senior recruiters now, you know, we make them back it up from the money. Like, you walk in the morning and the calls that are closest to the money, in other words, prep calls, debrief calls, closing calls, making offers, managing the final process comes first. And then very often the modern recruiter, the seasoned person you're talking about, he or she knows that there's 3 job orders that I need to find candidates for. So I'm going to make recruiting calls first. But each one of those recruiting calls gets turned into a marketing call. They're asking candidates where they want to work, where they've interviewed. At the same time, that person generally is following 5 to 10 companies in their niche in a sort of shadowy way. So they're constantly looking to see what postings come online. In the afternoon, they're following up on those postings. Hey, Wilson, I just saw that you posted this. This is my sweet spot. I've placed 3 people just like that in that space. Do you have any need for urgency? Do you want me to jump on that? And then, yes, they're putting together probably 10 or 15. That's a real number. You know, I'm too old and too rich to lie to people. People say to me, do top producers make 100 calls a day? No, they don't. They would be crazy to. But they're making 10 or 15 pointed business development calls to certain companies in their niche. They're making 25 to 30 recruiting calls to candidates that they got the phone numbers from yesterday from Lucia in LinkedIn. And yes, they're also sending email blasts. And yes, they're also sending text mail blasts. And yes, they're going to write an article for LinkedIn Pulse. And yes, they're going to go to a trade show next month and take 2 days off from work so they can be around 300 of their clients in their space. So it is just a more complex, sophisticated, but this is what I tell the seasoned people. It's a less boring life. It's much more corporate. It's much more fun. It's much more interesting. You know, in the old days, the bottom line was a lot of people had the energy and testosterone to get up and running because all you had to do was were you strong enough to pound out 100 cold calls a day every day? Yep. Well, some people could, but right around year 3, they go, well, this is no fun. And some people by that time had built a following enough to stay with it, and then they hire recruiters to do some of their work for them. But today's recruiter just has a more rich experience. They have a more sophisticated but energized and fun work experience. I just think the seasoned people have all the advantages of the skills and their branding and their contacts, but if they would just embrace some of these new ways rather than just be dismissive about it, I think they'd find the average $300,000 to $400,000 biller could bill $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 without really changing too much. They might, in fact, and I've seen this in people I mentor, they might work less and make twice the money they've ever made if they would just get out of their own way.
Work smarter, not necessarily harder. And I agree that the tools that are out there, in my opinion, or at least the way that my simple mind works is I look at them as they amplify what you do. If you do it well, it's going to amplify that you're doing it well. If you do it poorly, it's unfortunately going to amplify that. But you know, the technology has changed, and I do agree. I think it was Jay Abrahams once told me that, you know, the pillars of success, you know, basically are the sales process, that if you're just linked to just cold calling, or if you're just linked to emailing, or if you're just linked to, you know, LinkedIn, if you pick just one of those marketing niches, if something happens where you're overly dependent on it, and whether there's a regulation, there's a social shift, your business can be gone overnight. In these robocalls, for people that are overly dependent solely on phone. And there again, phones work amazingly well, but they're different than they were 10 or 15 years ago, or even 5 years ago. But these robocalls, now everyone, instead of getting a live person, they're getting the voicemails and the challenges that go there. Speaking of challenges, what do you see as the biggest challenges for the recruiting industry, let's say over the next 5 years, Danny?
Yeah, so here's what I guess here's what I put number one. And I think the jury's out, and I'll explain why in a sec. So I think the number one threat is not the obvious answer. Everybody says artificial intelligence and, machine learning. And I don't think there's any question that over a period of time, they will be able to do the sourcing and screening. A lot of what recruiters spend a lot of time doing, there certainly will be tools that will do it faster. But I see that as a plus because historically, if you look at the industry, Monster comes up and everybody predicts the end of the recruiting industry, and then you realize that recruiters use the job boards better than anybody else. And then LinkedIn comes in and everybody goes, social media will kill the recruiting industry. The jig is up. Mystery's gone. We know where you get the people from. Okay, but you can't get the people. And every time a so-called sea change has come technology-wise, we're a nimble and adaptive and smart enough industry so that we say, yeah, we'll do those tools for you and we'll use the tools, but at the end of the day, the best people are not looking and the companies want the best people, and it is that dynamic that keeps us in business. So I don't worry about machine learning or artificial intelligence, but I'll tell you what bothers me, and I'm not sure there's a simple answer, and that is the combination of the technology and the tools along with companies saying, well, hold on now, maybe we can't recruit Wilson Cole or Danny Cahill if they're making 7 figures to come work for us. But what about the pretty good recruiter, the one that bills $200,000 or $300,000, makes $100,000 depending on their commission schedule, has a nice middle class life? Why don't we take that person and give them $125,000 and all the benefits and take away their commission risk and their up and down sales life and give them a nice fat corporate job and call them VP of Talent Acquisition and give them 3 sourcers and give them all the LinkedIn recruiting tools they want. And instead of paying, we paid $1.6 million in fees last year. Well, what if we pay this person $150,000 and pay each one person that works for him $70,000? So now we're up to $350,000 plus benefits. So for $500,000, we can fill all our jobs next year and save $1 million in fees. Why wouldn't we do that? Now, all the obvious arguments, and your audience is screaming right now. The people that are hearing me are going, well, they're not as good as us. Those are all horrible recruiters. They couldn't make it here, so they went over to the dark side. Okay, get over yourselves. I've seen seriously good recruiters. I lost one myself, 4 years here. One of our best young recruiters. She was making $200,000 here, but she said, I'm curious, what's the corporate life like? I know what the agency life is like. I don't know what the corporate life is like. And now she's talent acquisition. She's got a seat at the C-suite. She loves it. A friend of mine who owned a firm went over to Google. And is in talent ac and Google and likes it. So I don't buy the argument that they're all inept and incompetent and they suck and they'll all implode. No, that's not true. And so I think that's the biggest threat. Companies saying, I don't see the vast majority, not the good ones, and hopefully, most of the people on this call would be in this category. We're finding people that are very good. We're finding them fast, and we're so niched, and we have such good embedded relationships that we're basically using the argument of, I understand you have talent act. They don't have all the people. I don't have all the people. I work on a contingency basis. Let me compete. Best man wins. That's okay. That'll probably get you through until there is a recession. And then if there is a recession, and you and I both know there will be, I've been through 4, when the 5th one comes, for the first time in history, companies are going to say, do we, and I don't know the answer to this, Wilson, I don't know anybody who does, it's going to go one of 2 ways. It's either going to be fabulous for us, and they're going to go, well, wait a minute, we had the $500,000 investment in the Talent Act team because we were filling 45 jobs a year. But if in the recession we're only going to fill 10, then it makes sense to let go of the Talent Act people and just pay Danny Cahill 3 or 4 fees. Doesn't that make more sense? I hope that's the way it goes. But it could also go the other way, where they go, you know what, it's a recession. We only have 40 jobs. We're loyal to our Talent Act people. So now, while we were letting Danny Cahill compete on a contingent basis for 10 of those jobs, we're not paying those 10 jobs anymore.
Okay.
And I think that's a real threat to our business. The only thing I've done so far is a continuation of what I've always felt, which is my arguments for using me along with Talent Act will fall on deaf ears to large corporations. But there are smaller and mid-sized companies who don't make that kind of investment in Talent Act, and those are going to be my clients. And frankly, I'm trying to get as many of those as I can before the next downturn.
That's wonderful advice, and I agree with you. You know, it's with recessions come neat opportunities, but they also can create a restless night or so. So, what do you see?
Do you find that though, Wilson? Is that what's your thought on the internal recruiters? How do you guys try to overcome that objection? Do you run into it much?
Well, we're over strictly on the collection side. So with us, we're helping, of course, you guys get paid.
Right. But you must have clients who run into this, though. You must hear about what they do with it.
100%. And we do have some that, because we've actually gone after accounts where they hired the recruiter and for the job position that they were looking for, which was a placement fee as far as ours or our attorneys were concerned for our clients. And so we have seen that from a collection side where they just come in and they say, hey, we're looking for somebody over HR, we'll just take your recruiter. So we are definitely seeing that. It seems like it peaked probably 2 or 3 years ago. Now, not to say that it's still not happening, we're just not seeing it here on the collection side as much.
Right.
With one thing that is always true, the indicator that we see for a recession is we start seeing huge balances come in for collections from the temp side, and we see a huge surge in backdoor hires to where I don't know why. To me, it almost seems counterproductive that they're hiring people going into a recession, but they're typically hiring people and not wanting to pay the fee. So we see surge. That's kind of an indicator that there's probably something running through the economy. So, but I do agree with you. I think that the internal recruiter, as the companies start expanding and trying to pull the talent out of the agency side, I think that that's a real problem. What do you see, though, with going into the recession? And I know this is you really can only look back at the past to predict the future, but what do you see with that next recession? What do you see as the biggest opportunity for a recruiter, or as you may have already touched on that, as far as how do you prepare for that next recession? Because I mean, we're 6 months or 2 years out. At some point, the economy has to excel. It's just not going to defy gravity. What do you see?
Yeah, no question. And most estimates are 14 months. The good news is I was listening to a really great economist at Pinnacle named Elliot Eisenberg, and he said it's probably, a year to 14 months out. The good news is he doesn't feel like it's going to be the 2009 level recession, which was obviously cataclysmic. He's thinking more 2001-93 recession. Well, so it's a mild sort of recession. But, when you're in our business, where employment is the first one hit in a recession, so there's no such thing as a mild recession. I'm a big believer in the fact that, they say this about candidates. The old axiom is, it's not a recession if you have a job. Right. So if your neighbors are laid off, you feel sorry for your neighbors, but you're not laid off, so you didn't know there was a recession. I think the same thing is true for recruiting firms in a recession if they've got an excellent client base. So look at it this way. Every single day in the walls, and if you look at Wall Street, if you look at that ticker, you watch CNBC while you're riding that life cycle at lunch, and you see that ticker, and there's green and there's red. So every single day, there's companies that are doing well and there's companies that are doing poorly, and that doesn't change in a recession. So to me, and I say this every single day, my people are so sick of me saying this, they roll their eyes. Here's what bad firms do. Bad firms think good times are never going to end. They have plenty of jobs. They've got senior people who can get jobs. Senior people have stopped making business development calls years ago. They just milk their current client base. What do you got this month, boss? What do you got this month, boss? They hire a bunch of recruiters. So now they've got, 7, this is an actual firm that I work with, 7 senior recruiters and 21 people in the firm. So 14 sourcers. And the idea is, well, we're trying to make as much money as we can. You know, John here has all these job orders. Well, here's what happens. Now, the recession comes, and as you well know, Wilson, when the recession comes, it doesn't come gradually. It doesn't announce itself. It's just you walk in one day, and it's here. And the whole, you know, the water spigot doesn't work anymore. So those firms tend to struggle because they've got 21 employees. There's a payroll every single week, and now there's nothing to work on. And the single biggest mistake I see people make is they say, well, we don't want to lose old Lou here. He's been with us 3 years. He's an excellent sourcer. Maybe he can learn how to develop business. No, he can't. If he could have, he would have done it before now, and he certainly ain't going to be able to do it in a recession. So the best firms contract and let go of those recruiters, and they go back down to 7 people, which is enormously disheartening morale-wise. I get it. But that's the price you pay for expanding too much. What I try to do is never have that kind of ratio of, 3-to-1 sourcers to recruiters. I don't think it's necessary, especially if you're using the tools correctly. But I believe in getting client development done during the good times. So right now, my people are forced, mandatory. They have to make cold business development calls every single day. And they go, boss is nuts, man. We have so many job orders, and he wants us to get more. But what I'm looking for is a client base that is wide in scope. It's deep as far as breadth. We've got a decent level of clients who are doing great. They're on the green of that ticker. And if we do that and the recession comes, we'll never feel it. Not only will we never feel it, but we'll go recruit the people who are good recruiters that you had to let go. And we will grow during a recession. I've done it 4 times.
Well, that's that is very wise advice, Danny. That is, it's the gospel. So I certainly agree with you on that. Now, we'll wrap up, and I know that a lot of folks that have listened to this conversation want to know, okay, how do I do business with Danny? If I'm a recruiter, I've got rookies, I'm a seasoned recruiter. How do they reach out to you? What's the best way to start that relationship with you, Danny?
I appreciate that. Yeah. So my training company is called, arrogantly enough, according to Danny.com. It's a subscription service. It's an online coaching service where every month we have videos that we put in play. And my speaking and coaching business is simply a reflection of my search firm. My search firm is a think tank for the things I put online. Anything you see from me in the way of training, information, whether it's a podcast, I have a podcast, I have webcasts, I have 4-minute videos on skill sets. If you're a member of AccordingToDanny.com, you get all of that stuff. I think it's $100 or so a month. We have a few thousand firms that are members. If they just go to AccordingToDanny.com and look for information, they'll get a hold of my marketing director, and she'll certainly welcome them as members. If not, there's, as you said, 2 books in the bookstore. And there's a whole black market of me on YouTube. I have no idea how it gets there, but it's on there. So there's lots of ways they can find me, I guess.
Well, outstanding. Well, Danny, I can attest as a vendor to the industry. Like I said, whenever we take a look, because we probably do about 12 to 14 conferences a year, and we put a star by the ones that you're speaking at because we know attendance is always going to be high. And so if any of our listeners out here are listening to this, I can't recommend enough, go out and contact Danny because, as Danny mentioned, everything that I have been told with people that have gone through it is it's not in theory, it's in practicality, and it does get results. Well, Danny, I appreciate you joining me on this episode, and I am sure I will see you out on the road again at some of your speaking arrangements. And once again, I appreciate you joining me this week.
Look forward to it. Thanks, Wilson. Take care.